This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Live from Brussels, this is The Late Late Show with Jeff Pedley, and you are listening live.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to The Late Late Show. Tonight, how do you engage students who struggle to articulate their ideas? Do you take into account working and long-term memory when setting writing tasks? Tonight, I'm joined by a pedagogical lead to explore how cognitive science can help us nurture academic writing in the classroom. Team English!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org or join in the conversation by downloading the Podbean app and following Teachers Talk Radio. #TT Radio.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to The Late Late Show. It is Thursday, the 26th of January. My name is Jeff Pedley. I am very pleased to be with you tonight. And as I said in the intro there, how do you engage students who struggle to articulate their ideas? Now, and before I introduce our guest tonight, I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of my week, actually. It's been an extremely busy week myself. My S7s, which in the English equivalent of Year 13s, are currently in the middle of their pre-back exams, their winter exams, which is quite nice for me on my timetable. I have, I think it's 5 extra free periods this week. However, unlike the English system, it means I have to do invigilation. Now, I can't ever remember as a teacher having to invigilate. I think it was got rid of before I had to do it and given out to non-teaching specialists, but not the most exciting part of the week. But that's the big focus at the minute. So it goes towards their final grade. So all of my S7s are currently involved in their exams. I've also come out the back of a few observations as well. I was observed externally by a lady who came over from Poland within the European system and observed me a few weeks ago, just before Christmas. And then last week I was observed by the director, the head teacher as well. So it's been a very, very busy start. I actually got a message. My last email from the school was from the humanities, the human resource department, the last day of term, to tell me that I had an observation on the third day back. I have never heard anything like that before. I thought I was getting an electronic Christmas card, and it was actually to tell me I was getting observed on the Thursday straight after school. But it all went well. It went really well. And I think something else I'm looking forward to this week, I have an intern who's going to be following me around at school, and she's doing a master's in sociolinguistics at the University of Montpellier down in France, in the south coast of France. And it kind of mixes two of my subjects together because I'm a literature graduate, but I also my dissertation encompassed social construction and sociology, and I also teach sociology on the side as well. It's about I don't always admit that, but it's about 20% of my timetable. So I'm very excited to have somebody who's at the forefront of social linguistics following me around next week. But anyway, without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce our guest tonight. Her name is Chloe McNamee, and she is the pedagogical lead of English at a school in Hampshire. She's also an English GCSE examiner, and she has a big interest in cognitive science and indeed how it helps us as English teachers. Chloe, how are you tonight?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. I know you went to see Macbeth last night. How did it all go?
Oh, it went really, really well. It was a really good production, and the students really enjoyed it, which was lovely. And thankfully, all students came back in one piece, so another trip survived.
Yeah, how many did you take?
We were meant to take 34, I believe, but we had a couple call in sick at the last minute. So I think our final numbers were just over 30. So not a massive group, but still felt like 300 when I was ferrying them in and out of places.
Yeah. How many times have you seen it now? How many times have you seen Macbeth?
How long's a piece of string? I really couldn't count. I think I watch it at least 4 times a year, minimum.
Yeah.
So goes on and on.
No, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. As I say, after it's 2 late nights in a row, eh? And no, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to start talking about my absolute nerd now on cognitive science and how it applies to English and all the wonders that is the human brain and its relation to writing.
Yeah, and as I spoke with you briefly yesterday, and I said I was going to play dumb with this, like play dumb, but I probably will. I probably will be done with this as well. And I know we've got some listeners as well who have such a wide range of experience with this, from teachers who absolutely know almost nothing to do with this, all the way up to teachers who have specialised in this.
Yeah.
But just before we go into a bit more detail about this, what's your background, Chloe? I introduced you as a pedagogical lead, and that's the role that you still have now.
Yeah, so I've kind of taken on a dual role. So I was a pedagogy lead last academic year for my department. And then through one of my colleagues going on maternity leave, was promoted to acting assistant head. So I've kind of done both roles simultaneously. And yeah, no, I've been in my role now since September. And so I think I would now just class myself as an English teacher that does a lot. Is basically the title.
I'm so pleased to have an English teacher on as well. I kind of have dominated the shows with English teachers as well, but
Yeah.
yeah, Team English, sticking with what I know.
There we go.
And how are you finding the role? How are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I enjoy looking into the theory of teaching and how practice can be improved and evolved. And then I like making my team do all of these ridiculous things that I'm finding, and then working out what does work, what actually doesn't work for our learners, and then just trying to improve the way that we teach through little changes and then some bigger changes to hopefully at one point have a really cohesive and responsive teaching program that allows for all learners to access what we're trying to deliver.
Yeah. So, first things first. What do you understand by cognitive science? I mean, and again, I'm pitching this at somebody who's never really considered this as well. Maybe an old school type of teacher. How do you explain it to somebody who's never really touched upon this in their studies?
So the way I've always thought about it as an introduction is cognitive science in terms of education is understanding how you learn. So it's how you retain information. It's how you can remember the most minute details of a subject to then either apply that in an exam setting or in wider life. And one I was listening to, I think it was a TED talk about 2 or 3 years ago, and this guy was giving a really clear example on the cognitive reasons why you have to do things over and over and over again before it becomes solid in your mind. And he said you remember your telephone number; it's an 11-digit number, and you can recite it by the snap of a button, no issues. You just remember it. And then he said, but could you tell me the hotel room number that you stayed in 3 years ago? And so it was getting us to think about how when we do something over and over, it becomes so much easier to retrieve from our memory than trying to remember a potentially 3-digit number on a door that we haven't ever thought about. We didn't really think about when we were looking at the door. And so there's just no memory of it within our long-term memory. I think that kind of encompasses just basically understanding how you learn. Cognitive science is understanding what you learn.
And how did you start applying this to English? Like when you first went into it, what were your first sort of tentative steps to connect this with the subject?
I think I wanted to understand if you've ever looked at the English national curriculum. It's
Yeah,
so,
unfortunately,
yeah,
yeah.
it's so like weighted in equal parts to knowledge and skills.
Mm,
But there's no entwining of these two things. The national curriculum states quite clearly what it wants the students to know and what it wants the students to be able to do. But there's no explanations on whether the students should be using those skills to explore that knowledge. And so I first started off thinking about, well, actually, in summative assessments, what are we actually asking students to do? And are we preparing them for that? Do we give them the tools? Do we give them the skills in order to apply the knowledge that we are teaching through our curriculum? And when I took a step back, looking at not just my curriculum, but also I was still doing like ECT work and things
yeah.
at this point. And so lots of the ECT program was looking at this as well. It was looking at how you can make a curriculum cohesive with skills and knowledge. And so that's kind of where I started in terms of applying cognition to like the world of English.
Yeah, and this idea, this relationship between knowledge and skills is so interesting as well. And just coming away for a second, but as English teachers, do you feel? I mean, what do you find easiest to teach, knowledge or skill, or do you, or like I say, with the way that you are teaching now, you are managing to find the connections that in
I
lesson
still
by
think,
lesson?
yeah, no, I still think it's easier to teach knowledge because knowledge it feels more tangible when you teach it. It's
Yeah.
very, this is what I'm going to teach you, and it's easier to assess if students have left your classroom with that knowledge. You can do a checking for understanding, a whiteboard drill, however you're going to do
Mm,
it, and you can assess if they have that knowledge. But a skill is something that it takes months and years to refine, to learn, to understand.
mm,
Um, and I was thinking about actually our national curriculum across all key stages, not just the key stages that I teach. And so when learners first go into school, essentially from the get-go, they start learning how to write like "my name is," and they start learning
mm,
how to put adjectives into sentences. And so we teach them like the fundamentals of like formulating sentences. And then when they come up to secondary, suddenly the curriculum shifts focus from being like descriptive to being very analytical. And then as you get
mm.
further up the key stages, it's critical and exploratory. And so you really just have to take a step back and think, well, actually, when are we explicitly teaching these skills? How do you teach someone to be critical on a text or exploratory on a text? Something so undefined. How are you going to teach someone else how to come up with a critical idea, and who are you to say that what is and isn't a critical idea?
Yeah.
So really big questions.
And and I think that must have been your initial sort of entry into this as well. That,
Mm.
as I say, taking the step back, looking at the skills, and then starting to dip your feet in the water and start to try things in the classroom and see what. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did lots of reading around like the cognition of like writing and the cognition of reading.
Mm,
And Jennifer Webb, who is phenomenal and has done so much research into this, and is also a phenomenal English teacher, wrote a book called the Metacognition Handbook. And it was exploring how you have to teach learners how to think before you can teach them how to write. And this was also echoed in works like Teach Like a Champion,
mm.
which is heavily pushed on ECTs at the moment. So I'm sure lots of people will be familiar with it. Um, and it's essentially, we expect students to know how to do skills almost intrinsically, when actually we have to teach them how to understand the skill that they're doing. So how they think about the skill and then how they apply the skill. Whereas at the moment, lots of practice nationally centers around if they know what the skill is, they should be able to do it. But it's
Mm,
almost like telling a student you need to score a 3-pointer, pointing at the basket and saying off you go. You're not teaching them actually how to do it. You've told them what the skill is, throw the ball into the basket, but
mm.
you haven't taught them the steps, the break it down, the one part at a time, and mastering each section before they're able to throw the ball into the basket.
Yeah. So a teacher coming to this for the, like I say, at this initial stage, then what would you recommend, and what worked for you when you really started to unpick what students needed to know, how to think? What were the kind of first activities you started to do in the classroom?
So I really took it back to I'm a massive believer that you have to model everything that you do. If you
Yeah.
want the students to be able to do something, you've got to model it to them. So I started off this is when I was in ECT, so I had far more time on my hands to be able to do this. When I was like
Yeah, not
creating,
heading off to Macbeth every evening
no,
and talking on the radio. Yeah,
yeah, I would write out my model. If I was answering a question on Macbeth, for example,
yeah. Mm,
and I was like, right, I know what I want to say. So I would just write it all out to begin with. And then I would make myself go back through my model and work out how I constructed the sentence that I
mm,
constructed. So one of the things that I always teach is like a topic sentence. So like your first line of inquiry, the introduction to your argument.
mm,
And I wrote a topic sentence by myself for Macbeth that was something along the lines of Macbeth, the quintessential loyal thane, is presented as violent to foreshadow his future acts. And I stopped and like broke down the construction of that sentence,
mm,
and I could not articulate to myself why I'd used a noun appositive. I just
mm,
knew that by using one, my writing was more detailed. And so then
mm,
when I started thinking about, right, well, why did I know that that was going to make my writing more detailed? I then thought to myself, well, it's because I understand that by using a noun appositive, you naturally add further information to a point. So you're
mm,
being more exploratory. And then I took it back even further and I was like, right, I know how to use noun positives because I've been using them since I was, I think, about 12 or 13 years old when I was taught them at school.
yeah.
And then I went back to like the way that I've been like teaching, and I hadn't taught noun positives. I hadn't even gone over noun positives at this point.
Mm,
And so I was like, well, how am I expecting a student to come up with this sort of answer, or how am I going to model this sort of answer to them if I've not even taught them that really minute skill within my first opening sentence? And so then it was stripping back almost an essay to a sentence level and thinking to myself, right, I understand how an essay works, I understand the purpose of an essay, but do my
mm,
students, do they understand what an essay actually does? Or is it just a word that they've had thrown at them and they understand, oh, it's a lot of paragraphs and Miss makes me write them all the time and I don't really like them, but she's going to make me do
yeah.
it, so I've got to do it. Um, and when I started thinking about essay writing in that sense, or even just like the articulation of an argument in that sense, I realised that actually I was not being an effective practitioner because I was going into my subject assuming,
Mm,
oh yeah, kids will know how to do noun positives and how to embed quotations and how to punctuate sentences correctly. When
mm.
actually, if I haven't explicitly taught that, it's not going to have happened.
Yeah, and as you say, going back to our the initial question about working and long term memory,
Mm,
if it's not natural as well, and you're really having to
yeah,
think of how to embed and think of how to, uh, do you know, and put the
yeah,
technical
no,
terms in,
exactly.
etc. It's no way you're going to remember any quotes. No way you're going to be, thinking of
Exactly.
the soliloquies, etc.
Yeah.
So
If
you're just
students are
overloaded. Yeah, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
no, no, no. If students are trying to simultaneously um, actively think about the construction of each individual sentence and actively think
Yeah,
about the knowledge that they're applying to those sentences, the working memory is just going to get overloaded and they're going to become static as they'll just feel, if we go to like zones of proximal development, they'll just be in that panic zone and they'll be like, I am not secure in how to write a sentence. I'm not secure in the knowledge. And Miss is asking me to do both things at
mm,
once. And so then the student will feel as though they are failing when actually it's because we haven't taken that time to break it down, go over each of the individual skills, apply it
yeah.
to either knowledge that they're secure on with a new skill or use a skill that they're secure in to apply new knowledge.
Just moving out of sentence level and start to think about like more of the essay structure or even
Mm,
paragraph structure. Do you think? Do you think that so many teachers? Oh, well, not. I don't think this is the main reason, but do you think one of the reasons maybe why teachers resort to P paragraphs, Peel paragraphs, P paragraphs is because that it's just such an easy thing to remember, and it doesn't overload the working memory, etc. And you can just use that as the structure automatically without having to think a little bit more detailed about how you structure a paragraph.
Yeah, no, I do. I think as well, it's something tangible for the students. It is almost a checklist for them in their mind. They
Yeah,
make a point. Like it was always PEE paragraphs for me. They make their point, they make their evidence, they do their explanation, and it becomes repetitive and it becomes that drilled practice with them. Um, but then you almost stunt them in terms of their academic writing growth because if they're
yeah,
always just thinking, oh, a paragraph is a point, an evidence, and then an explanation, and they never look any further or they are never exposed to any um, writing structures or styles that are further than that
yeah,
PEE. Yeah, I don't disagree with teaching PEE in like key stage two and key stage like key stage one and key stage two, where students are mastering, writing at the individual
yeah,
letters really, and coming up with their own ideas to begin with. It does work. I think we
yeah.
just have to recognize with any sort of writing structures, there's always going to be constraints to it.
And that's the thing, isn't it? For me, I always feel it like it moves up that bottom. The students that really struggle at the bottom to articulate, maybe put them into a. I'm talking maybe the 2 grade student that then goes up to a high 3 or something. But nothing. But as you say, or maybe scrapes into the 4. But at that other state, at that other end, I agree with you. It really like stunts people, doesn't it? The
Mm,
students that are going for the highest grades. And I mentioned briefly at the start as well that you're a GCSE examiner.
yeah.
And when you're examining these scripts and you're seeing, yeah, I'm just interested. Like, what's your view when you see these writing structures? I know we've moved slightly away from cognitive
No,
science
no.
here, but when you see in essays these writing structures, how does it? On reflection, were the students successful when they did this, or did it kind of fit into that idea of it moved some of the lower attaining students up a bit and then stunted the top?
Yeah, I think with a structure like a PE paragraph, it is restrictive, but it's
Yeah,
designed to be restrictive. That's the nature of it. So in examining marking that I've done previously, you can always tell when a PE paragraph is being used because it is very stop, start, stop, start. So they
yeah,
will make a single point. They will, and it is a simple sentence. They will give you a piece of evidence that is introduced in a very simplistic way, and then they will explain that evidence. And sometimes
yeah,
that explanation will go on for 3 or 4 sentences. Sometimes it will just be a sentence. And so I think when we're teaching like a writing structure like PEE, you've always got to think about, well, what in teaching that am I actually restricting? Um, the upper end of the spectrum essays that I read very rarely followed a PEE or Petal or Peter
mm.
or Peter Piper, whatever it's going to be, structure. And it
We
was
need
more
some
of,
new names, don't
yeah,
we,
we
Chloe? We
do, we
need
really
some new
do.
names.
Yeah. I saw Forest, was that one? Or A Forest was one of
Is that
them.
for
That,
persuasive
I think that
devices,
was,
was it?
yeah, Persuasive. Oh, Fanboys. I've seen a lot on
Fanboys.
Twitter. There's a
Oh.
lot floating about. And so at the
It
top,
it really makes me cringe when the teachers say "pee all over your essays." That's such a cringe. Like, reminds me of saying that I'm obviously older than you, but it reminds me of like Doctor Evil in Austin Powers, when he's like, I'm hip," and he's like trying to be trendy with the kids, and it's
oh,
like
yeah,
disaster.
you
But
just cringe at the whole thing, yeah. So no, at the top end, academic writing does tend to be more organic, and it tends to you'll see it, and it's really lovely when you see it in
mm,
student writing where they've started arguing a point, and as they're arguing it, you can actually see their thought process of how they've suddenly linked it to another part in the play or another part in the poem or the novel
yeah.
or whatever it's going to be, and it becomes this they tend to be quite long paragraphs as well, like I'm talking like a page long paragraph. But yeah, but it's because all of this analysis is linked and entwined, and it doesn't read as an individual like block paragraph, and then when you go on to the next paragraph it's this completely unrelated point. it
mm,
it naturally leads itself into one another. And if we go back to the idea of like PE structures, that structure doesn't allow for that organic shaping of writing. And
Yeah.
so that's where I think metacognition comes in to support writing, because if you teach students the knowledge that you have to teach, and then you teach them how to write, they're then able to apply their writing knowledge to their like academic curriculum knowledge, and then it becomes more entwined, as opposed to like almost, I always think about it like blocking when you've got like PE paragraphs. It's dun
Yeah.
dun dun, and that's it.
I'm really interested about you about what you were talking in respect of like verbalizing your own thought process and how you model with the students, how you like start to articulate your ideas. How do you do that in the classroom? Are you a fan of walking, talking mocks? Do you like, just doing paragraphs and verbalize, like literally just saying what's on your mind really slowly? Like how do you model your thought process with the class?
So I think the way I do it is I just act dumb. Like I'll be writing a paragraph and I'm like, right, I've got to come up with a point. How am I going to come up with this point? What is
Yeah.
my point going to be? And I think when you break it down like that, because obviously you're the expert in the classroom, they're the novices. If when you're modelling, you make your questions out to yourself sound like you are a novice, I feel
Mm.
like it creates that culture of, oh, okay, like it's okay for me not to know straight away
You
what
can
my
take
point's
them
going to
with
be.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to work it out. Whereas I found when I first started like verbalizing modeling, and I watched a CPD session on it, and this guy was doing like two different types of modeling. One was very like you are almost lecturing them, and the other one was
Yeah.
more, oh, okay, how am I going to work this out? And I just found that like lecturing style that I was doing in like the early stages of my career, it was
Mm.
very like, I know that I need to write my point. Here's my point, and I would write it out. But I wouldn't model, like, because that's what modeling was. I wasn't modeling how I actually came to that point. So now when I
Yeah.
model, it's very much like, right, I know that I'm answering a question. So obviously I'm thinking about a lesson that I taught on Jekyll and Hyde, where I was modelling on writing on duality.
Mm.
And I was like, right, I know that I'm talking about duality, but whose duality am I actually talking about here? What quote am I using? So I take it
Mm.
all the way back to, right, this is the quote I'm using. What duality am I speaking about? I'm talking about the duality of Utterson. How am I going to articulate that into a point? And then I verbalize myself, like going through the strategies of articulating a
Yeah.
perfect sentence that I've gone through with the kids, where I'm like, right, do I want to use a noun positive here, or am I wanting to use like author intent in my noun positive, or do I want to use like to show that I'm understanding like the comparison of Utterson? All that might work because
Yeah.
I'm talking about like duality. So let's try that, and then it's just like that trial and error, that trial and error.
Yeah.
And I think I am quite convincing with the kids when I'm modelling, because they start answering my questions like, Miss, you need some help here. Like, we got the answers. Which is then really great, because they're like, oh, okay, no, I understand that part now. So I
Yeah.
modelled like chunks of my writing. I would never model an entire paragraph. So I tend to model either the first part or like the last part of a
Yeah.
paragraph. And it's just that verbalizing it, but verbalizing it as though you are the novice. As if you model it as the expert that you are, the students aren't the expert, and so they're not going to know how to ask themselves those questions. But those really simplified down questions of, what am I trying to say? Well, I don't even
Yeah.
know what my quote is at this point. Let's find my quote first. Let's choose that, and then breaking it down that way. I found that I've had more success with the improving of writing.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and you're really making me reflect tonight as well. And just as a side note, I love if you ever get a question on Utterson, like the duality in Jekyll and Hyde. I just love how rich the first page is. The first two paragraphs of Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
you can answer that question. You can do your GCSE on the first
You
paragraph of Jekyll
honestly
and
don't even need to read the rest of the book. That's the duality done.
Hyde. Yeah, chapter 10. Who needs it? Stop at 9. There we are.
Stop at
Jobs are
page
good.
one.
Do you know when we changed to the new scheme, when the new text came in the literature, when I was back in England, the first text, our head of department chose Great Expectations as the first text
Ooh,
that we did. I think we bailed out halfway through
yeah.
because Yeah, it was. I'd love to hear from people if people still do Great Expectations. Do you do that as part of your marking, or is it you just focus on Jekyll and Hyde, Macbeth, and
Oh no! So when you examine a mark, you examine for the paper, so the whole breadth
yeah,
of it. I wish I could choose the questions I did, because sometimes I'm reading an essay and I do think to myself, like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know what you're
yeah,
trying to say.
yeah,
Because when the text that I'm more confident, this is off a tangent, but the text I'm more confident with, I'm like, I understand the point you're trying to make.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I know what you're alluding to here. I
yeah, yeah,
understand. Whereas with the really like obscure text where you get like 1 in 1,000 essays, you do think to yourself, why was someone teaching this? Why have you
yeah,
answered this question? But then in the same breath, I've had students walk out of the exams before. Thankfully, they're mocks, but telling me, yeah, I answered the Jane Eyre question, and I'm like, why? We don't study Jane Eyre. We don't do Jane Eyre, and
yeah.
they're like, yeah, I just felt like it. I was like, oh, brilliant! Thank you for that.
Yeah, I once had a student got a 4 grade in a text he'd never read, and I still to this day don't know how he did it. He made
Well,
he just started at question one. Have you seen this when you mark them? And they just if they start at question one and they just work their way through the
yeah.
booklet.
Well, one of my colleagues told me that she, in her actual GCSE, she didn't like the text that she was studying, but she had read one of the other texts,
Yeah,
answered a question on it, and I think she came out with a C. This is when we were in letters. She came out with a C
yeah,
or a B, and she was like, "Yeah, I was really proud of myself."
yeah.
Um,
How
and
must you
so
feel as a teacher? That's when you're like, yeah, I'm teaching knowledge and skills. It still is me.
there we go. If we teach them
Yeah,
skills, they can answer any question. We're setting them
yeah,
up for
yeah,
success
yeah.
here.
Yeah, the teachers. I'd be harping down the skills route definitely, but slightly embarrassed. But anyway, and I find that I find it so interesting the like literature. I do prefer literature to language, and going down that route of. The choices in the paper. I know. I briefly talked about Great Expectations there as well. I think that's the text again. I'm going back into my memory from 3-4 years ago. So, but is that the question that's matched up with the character setting and plot question, which it was so ill chosen because there's about 27 main characters in Great Expectations, and
Oh,
it's so hard to to
yeah.
predict
I think
what's going to go. Yeah,
I think for the 19th century novel, it is a theme motif or a character question.
yeah.
And so if you've got like 27 characters, best of luck. Best of luck.
I might have exaggerated a bit, maybe 26, 25. But
Oh,
no, Chloe, we're just going to have a very short break at the minute. I'd love to catch up with you after the news also. Thank you so much for this first half. I'm gonna thank you. We're gonna have a little break in the moment, but there's a few things I'd like to discuss with you just before we do. First things first, if you would like to get involved with the conversation today, you're more than welcome to send. You can contact us at TT Radio Official on Twitter and Instagram and everything else. You can contact myself at Jeff_Pedley, JEFF_PEDLEY on Twitter if you have any questions or would like to join in the conversation today. On top of this, we've also got starting from this Sunday on Teachers Talk Radio, we've got a show which is going to be the weekly review, and it takes place on Sundays at 10 a.m. It's live and it's on screen as well. And the first one is this Sunday, and it's a mixture of a review of the week and of some of the shows that we've been going, and you'll have a panel of Teachers Talk Radio hosts, and it's the inaugural show this Sunday. I would love to see you there if you're available. As I say, 10 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. Thank you so much for the support from my interview last week as well. It was really nice to hear so many positive comments of the interview with Martin Robinson. And again, this show today is sponsored by John Catt Publications. And again, I'd really suggest if you haven't had a listen, go have a listen to that show. You can catch it up on Spotify and Apple Music and all of the others. And Martin Robinson was discussing his show, Curriculum Revolutions, and it was really, really worth a listen. But anyway, I will speak with you in a moment.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Katz Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncatbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Christian Institute website carries a story on the reminder by Minister of State for Schools Nick Gibb that schools in England have a duty to remain politically impartial in their teaching and extracurricular activities. The guidance was published last year, but Mr Gibb was responding to MP Miriam Cates' references to a YouGov poll, which appears to reveal that the majority of UK children are being taught political ideology as fact, and he issued the reminder. Ms Cates was referencing a view that children are being taught that they can be born in the wrong body, as well as resources being used in schools which focus on the topic of gender identity. The DfE guidance comes as Scotland attempts to introduce new legislation on gender recognition, which is opposed by Westminster. The guidance states that schools should not under any circumstances work with or use materials produced by external agencies that take extreme political positions. The Varsity website reports on findings by a right-wing think tank that elite universities were more likely to use progressive terminology on their websites. Cambridge tops the table in the Radical Progressive University Guide, although the think tank Civitas does not appear to see this as a positive. Varsity highlights comments reported in the Daily Mail, which warned that half of our universities peddle their woke agenda to students. The think tank generated the findings after exploring university websites and news reports, looking for a series of key phrases including trigger warning, white privilege, and anti-racism. Those with high incidences of key phrases were at the top of the table. Varsity acknowledges a view that Cambridge's political culture is to the left of the national one, but also highlights key figures in academia who feature prominently in the conservative press. It's hard to stay away from politics as announcements of strikes continued late last week. The TES reports on the continued deadlock in Scotland, whilst the Evening Standard covers talks between ministers and unions in England after the NEU confirmed strike dates for the coming weeks and months. These strikes are set to impact schools in England and Wales, although the BBC further reports on talks in Wales. Its news website reports that teachers and school leaders have been offered a one-off payment by the Welsh Government, similar to that offered to health workers, although unions have already said that the offer is not enough. Scottish media outlets have also carried a story about what it describes as fears about violence in schools. A clip now widely shared on social media shows an altercation between two students and that took place on the same day a male pupil was left unconscious following an assault. Whilst Police Scotland have said it's investigating both incidents, it has sparked debate on the state of behaviour in schools, particularly as such incidents have featured in headlines before. The Scottish Government has previously stated they're investing an additional £15 million this year to enhance capacity to effectively meet the needs of young people, and that they were very clear that violence is unacceptable. In further political news, the petition put forward by three men known as the Three Dads Walking will go to Parliament. The men, who all lost daughters to suicide, want to get suicide prevention on the school curriculum. The petition they set up now has more than 155,000 signatures, which means that it will be discussed in Parliament, after previously failing to be heard. Finally, more than 20,000 defibrillators will be sent to almost 18,000 state-funded schools by the end of the academic year. It comes after the government committed to ensuring there was a device in every school last year. The rollout comes after campaigning from the Oliver King Foundation and its founder Mark King, whose son died at 12 from a cardiac arrest while swimming at school. Guidance to support schools has been created, including awareness videos, and Education Secretary Gillian Keegan praised the work of the Oliver King Foundation and described the rollout as a huge milestone. Mr. King stated, "Defibrillators save lives," and that he hoped that families do not have to suffer the heartbreak of unnecessarily losing a child. This is for our Ollie. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, a while ago I asked you what is your go-to piece of tech. This week I had the pleasure of talking to Ian Kenyon, CEO of Wirral Respite and Alternative Provision, also known as RAP for short. So, Ian, what is your go-to piece of tech in your setting?
Thanks, Steve. In our organisation, we are absolutely embedded in sharing our information and our data via the cloud. And there's loads of software out there to do it. And there's a lot of bespoke software for our type of organisation, student information management services, the likes of SIMS or Arbor or things like that. But unfortunately, they're all built around big organisations, big schools, schools with up to 1,200 students. Certainly not for schools that have a turnaround of students who are completing courses in 12 weeks, and those students who are potentially returning but require new files. We've tried proprietary software. It's very, very expensive. But actually what we've fallen back to is what Google provides. Using G Suite, which is now Google Workplace, we have access to spreadsheets, to form filling software for data collection, Google Docs, which is, you're very familiar with everything via traditional Microsoft Offices. Being able to link docs and sheets and forms together has been almost transformational for our organisation. It's not the cheapest, I will say. The per user price matches what other software like Zoho or Microsoft will do, but offers a simpler version for us, and offers us some interactivity that we've never had before. It handles our email, it handles our student information, so gathering attendance, it handles our finance, so invoicing. The way that the suite works, the way that the package works, just works really well for us, but with very little additional investment in time, effort and training. Google offers us everything that we need. The final sort of element that has been transformational for us is then being able to use proprietary hardware such as Chromebooks or even Android phones, and the ability for us to then transfer our data and to be live in the cloud at all times has been a really good thing for our organisation. So there you have it. My number one go-to, it's definitely got to be Google Workplace.
Thank you, Ian. As always, I'd love to hear what you want to know about tech. Do you have a go-to piece of tech? Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, welcome back. I am very pleased to be joined by Chloe tonight, who is the pedagogical lead of English in a school in Hampshire. She's also a GCSE examiner. And we've been talking all about cognitive science in the classroom, and specifically the English classroom, looking at how we can nurture academic writing. If you would like to take part and contribute tonight, you can contact us at TT Radio Official or at Jeff_Pedley. On all of the social media. Thank you to those of you who are listening live on the Podbean app tonight. Likewise, you can catch up with us, people who are listening later on the Spotify app and Apple Music and all of the rest, etc. And yeah, Chloe, welcome back.
Hello.
We had a nice old discussion just before the break there, and I was really interested in some of the practical aspects of what you'd found out and how you were starting to use them in the classroom. We talked a little bit about this verbalization and the modelling that you brought into the classroom since your reading. Is there anything else that's you've seen start to have a really big impact within the classroom?
So I think something that's really taken off within the world of like writing and just like teaching pedagogy for English is moving away from those prescriptive like acronyms that we were talking about earlier, and how actually we can use like sentence like key words or starters for students to in order to like elevate their writing. And this came out of some of the reading that I was doing on the metacognition, like of what, how, why, which feels at the moment it's becoming a bit more like PE. But in its earlier stages, when it was thought of as like a thinking strategy rather than a writing strategy, I was interested on how you can get students to articulate a response when you give them like the sentence starter of like but. So your response must begin with but, or it must begin with however, or it must begin with while, and you would actually get three very different responses to the exact same question when you give them those different writing starters. And so then it was looking at how through repetitive use and through embedding it into long-term memory in terms of their understanding of their writing, how they then draw on those different words and those different openings in order to come up with very articulate and very well thought out points.
And like I was saying, you were starting to see some impact with this as well, almost like you could see a really clear difference between some of the submissions.
Yeah, so I think this is something that is taken off more so, not just in terms of like my own school, but across the country. Because when I've been examining marking, or I also do some like ad hoc tutoring. You can see it in student writing that they are using words like while Dickens presents. It was an Oliver Twist essay I was reading, presents Noah as vulnerable. He also presents him as this predatory character towards Oliver. And so it was understanding that, it within just that simple sentence of starting it with while, they've embedded some authorial intent. They've understood that there's a complexity to the character of Noah. When actually that could, if I had taught them like a very prescriptive sentence of Dickens presents Noah as, it would become a really simplistic sentence. So it's thinking about how you can use sentence starters as like a springboard almost for student writing by teaching it as a thinking strategy.
Yeah, and like I say, we've talked a lot about literary essays tonight and the academic writing that required for that, and analysis really, hasn't it been? And there's so many nice texts that are on the scheme at the minute, and the characters are so nuanced, aren't they? And it's so complex, and just that's something that I always. I think that's the key, isn't it, with the students to work to explore this complexity. I sometimes when I'm first teaching literature, maybe like when I get a new year 10 class or something, I have two triangles on the board, and I try and, because students, I feel that students sometimes really want that easy answer, like a maths, and I kind of do use these triangles, and I'm like, maths has all this complex formula or input or whatever it is, a word question, and then it comes to the nice, neat, packaged, answer at the end that's correct. And English is that opposite. We've already got we've already got the package, which is the text itself, and then it goes on and spreads out into it being really complex. And like I say, those sentence starters that you've used there allow students to kind of just explore the complexity and the nuances.
Yeah, exactly. I think English is a very unique subject in the sense there's not a right answer in English. You're never going to read an essay that is, the perfect answer or even technically a right answer. And you'll never read one that's really a wrong answer unless there's an insecurity in knowledge. It's very difficult to argue a point wrong.
I did once, sorry to interrupt, I did once have a Jekyll and Hyde essay where they said that Jekyll had been banished to an island with monkeys on it. But I think that's the worst. That's the only time I've had a wrong answer for Jekyll and Hyde.
Going back to long-term memory, they obviously did not retrieve that piece of information enough.
Yeah.
Or I'm sure there is some film adaptation where that did happen. Because I've read many of Romeo and Juliet essays about meeting over the fish tank and the fights in a petrol station. So Anything's
That's funny.
possible.
At least it wasn't Romeo and Juliet or something.
Oh,
It was slightly.
well, slightly more academic for me.
Yeah. Which is interesting. It reminds me of something that I've discovered recently, and I know there's been a lot of discussion with Chat AI at the moment. And there was an amazing show on here actually. Tom Rogers did one a few earlier this week, and you can go back. Well, it was last week actually on Chat AI in the classroom. But I got an essay in a few, one of the first weeks back, maybe 2 weeks ago or so, and the essay was amazing and it matched the student's ability. There were a few typing errors there, but there was just an instant in there that was just completely made up, and it links to this idea of this chat. It fills in it just puts something that seems right if it doesn't really know what to put in.
Yeah.
It's really just going back to what we're talking there about. Sometimes the content is just random within it. I find it really interesting. How are you? What are your views on this chat AI?
I've seen a lot of it on Twitter, and I've
Mm.
actually seen Tom Rogers talking about it as well.
Mm.
I didn't understand what it was to begin with. I thought it was like this plagiarism websites where you can like pay
Yeah.
someone to do your dissertation. I thought that's what it was to begin with, and then I saw someone like put in to like where you say your like prompt, and they wanted the sculptor's perspective of the poem Ozymandias and how like the
Yeah.
it was in the same style, and actually it was a really beautiful like sonnet, and it was
Yeah.
I couldn't quite believe it'd been written by like this machine. So I think it's a very powerful tool. I do
Yeah.
worry about coursework based subjects and how you screen for
Yeah.
that, because I don't know if there's like a centralized database of all the answers that this machine has created.
Yeah.
And if not, we're really falling into territory where if like universities, PhD students, and anyone can just access this
Yeah.
world of information that they can then just apply, and no one would ever know that it wasn't their writing. And I think we'll move to an education system where we don't do any form of like coursework or written work in
Yeah.
that way, as there'll just be that paucity of trust.
The way I'm sort of dealing with it at the moment, I'm trying to. There's two kind of metaphors that I'm getting my head around. The one is that it's like the introduction of the calculator to maths, and you can no longer just set these are the sums for homework, and because you could just type them really easy, 13 times 17, etc. And it kind of brought along the basically the need for working out, the need to show you're working rather than just put the correct answer. And I find it really interesting about what we talked about earlier, because it's kind of from an essay point of view. That's what we might have to do. We might have to then assess. We might be able to get essays in, but it's what's more important is how did you get to this point? And in that case, what you were talking about before, of what the thought process is.
Yeah.
It's going to be so easy, I think, to see that it wasn't their thought process. When you
Potentially having students having to submit their like written scribbled out plans.
yeah.
But then if an AI can create an essay, I'm sure it could create a plan. So
But
it's the same way that when I was at school, I could scan my maths homework, and it would do all the workings out for me, and I just have to copy it.
Chloe, I cheated him. No, not cheated. Sorry, yeah, maths was something that I sometimes copied answers down from as well. Yeah, but
I'm
anyway,
really sorry, Mr. Colebrook, if you're listening. I did not get Pythagoras.
I'm sorry,
I
Mrs.
won
Freya. It's the English teachers' apology hour to their maths teachers.
It is, yeah.
But I know, and just think, but that's what I think. And I know we've gone off on a slight tangent here, but this idea of AI as well, because the AI, you can say within it, do this essay and make it look as though it wasn't done with AI, and make put in 5 spelling mistakes that make it look. It's crazy. It's crazy. I also think of it a bit of being like that we as well, anybody who uses the chat AI needs to kind of treat it a bit like being a chef at the pass, like on a restaurant. and like the chat AI is making the food, and like 90% of the time it's fine and it just goes straight out. But there could be something that's an absolute disaster, and you can't just. But it's that being that critical analysis, isn't it? Being able to work out what isn't correct
what isn't
and
quite
right.
right. Yeah, but if I'd hope if any of my kids are listening that they would never use chat GPI, is it?
Yeah.
Because I don't give them homework, or I don't give them like essay writing to do because I'm like, yeah, this is fun. I'm doing it because I want them to get better at it, and I'd rather them say, "Oh, sorry, I've not done it," than, "Oh yeah, my computer did it for me."
Yeah. Have you started using it as a teacher? It's okay. Your manager's not listening. It's okay.
No, I haven't. I haven't even like gone to the website.
Do
I've
it,
just seen
Chloe.
I've just
Do
seen
it.
people doing
Do
it.
it. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I'm sure it is, but I think I don't know, I'm not sold by, like, I'm not a technology person. Like, we're in 2023 and I've just bought my first pair of headphones.
Yeah.
So like I'm not exactly, technology revolution over here. I used my visualizer until it literally broke and wouldn't stand up anymore. So,
The European school that I teach at, I turned up, I told everyone I'm employed, indirectly employed by the European Union now. It's all singing. I got there and there were chalkboards. There still are
Yeah.
chalkboards. It's crazy. But it's a real mixture. But yeah, so we're a little bit behind on the technology in a few places. Just the only sort of 50, 60 years behind or so.
Only a couple of decades.
There's me with my iPad and my screen share, and it's like something from the year 3000, I think, for us. But just going back to this as well, I find it so interesting to go through. But yeah, like on the, like I say, hopefully my manager isn't listening as well. But I was on I get in the train in the morning, and I'm teaching. Have you ever taught or read a Monster Calls with Key Stage 3?
I did when I was training. I haven't done it since then, though.
It's worked really well with basically a year 7 class that I have over here. And anyway, on the way to work, it was already a week before, shall we say? Let's say a week before when I was planning, not on the day. I said to it something like, plan 15 comprehension questions for a year 7 class with answers up to page 100 in a Monster Calls. And it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. It did it like in a few seconds. And obviously I checked it and went through it, but it was just a really quick start. It's amazing. But yeah. So obviously I didn't use that in class, right, Chloe? Let's move away from this subject. Me just... I'm basically just selling our career away, aren't we, to chat AI?
Aren't you?
No, they were all wrong. They were all incorrect, and they didn't work. No. What do you prefer teaching, Chloe? What do you prefer teaching, language or literature? And just a couple of general questions to finish, really.
Yes, you said earlier, I'd much prefer teaching literature, and I think it is because it's that entwining of knowledge and skills as opposed to language, which is just 100% skill based. I like diving into the content and going on these like random tangents with my classes. Like earlier this week, we've been looking at the implications of Mrs. Berlin being her husband's social superior. And in the Edwardian era, why would a woman marry down? And so we were then talking about, much like Eric, and how when he assaulted Eva and got her pregnant, his first reaction was, let's go get married. We were then talking about, actually, is that what happened with Mrs. Berlin and Mr. Berlin, and why she did marry down? And if so, is that why Mr. Berlin is so just nonchalant to the mention of him getting someone pregnant and so blasé about it, whereas Mrs. Berlin, straight away blames the father of Eva's child. So that was a really interesting discussion. Whereas language, it's less interesting. Sorry to the example I use.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because there's a lot more needed from the students sometimes, especially the creative writing. You know, is that we talked a little bit about, so we haven't really touched too much on idea generation when it just comes out of nowhere. You know, when you're just told, write about a time you were surprised, you know, and it's just, there's so much
It's so broad.
that's needed to make it interesting. Do you know, there's so much needed to make it engaging. Most students could do something that ticks off the content, but to make it actually engaging is, and again, even, and when, like I say, when I was in England, I found this really interesting to do within the department. You know, how many of us can sit down and in 45 minutes or so bang out a really engaging text about a time when we impressed somebody, you know, and really, I find that so interesting. And when you were talking earlier about the thought process, you know, it's really interesting to reflect of where those ideas come from. That how do you filter out what you would include and what you wouldn't?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think with the language papers as well, I do feel they're sometimes the prompts that they're given aren't very inspiring. I think a couple of years ago, it was like what the written prompt was, write about a time something unexpected happened, and I'm like, what are you expecting them to say here? What's the purpose of that prompt? But
this prompt came up, end of essay.
Yeah, I do not know what to do here. You know what? If I came across that as a 40 marker response, full marks right there. They took a shot and
yeah, they've come through on the exam, the exam scheme that or the exam board that we use internally. One of the text forms is an online comment. Write an online comment that responds to, and I said to my students, if you did a smiley face or like a "this sucks" or something, it's not going to pass, but you would get more marks than you would do in any other. I mean, an online comment. Who writes a you know, a 3-paragraph online? Firstly, I would like to.
yeah. Secondly, in my opinion, it tends to be just you know, don't like this.
No. My very final question, because I know we're hitting that hour mark here, Chloe. But my very final question: what next? Where are you going to take your focus next with these studies? Do you think?
Well, interestingly, maybe it was the fact that the universe knew I was doing this evening. I've actually just had my offer through to do my master's next year. So
amazing.
I'm now doing my master's there on top of everything else.
Oh,
I'll be doing my master's next year. So that's very exciting. So I'll be delving further into the world of English.
Amazing. And yeah. So you start, and that was tonight, did you say? Sorry.
Yeah, I got the email just before my year 11 hour revision session, and you couldn't see when you just looked at the email if it was like a congratulations or a commiseration. And I was like, no, I can't open this. And then because if I'd been rejected, I was like, I can't teach for an hour and be okay. And so I've then said to myself, no,
Chloe, I'm pressing. I've got very few sound effects, but I'll press the clap button. There you go. That's 100 people there. Teachers Talk Radio saying well done. And I don't know how to stop him. Anyway, so you're just going to take it further now down the master's route.
You know, eventually I might stop, but we're not at the stopping point yet.
Yeah, amazing, and thank you so much for talking to me tonight as well.
Well, thank you for having me.
And yeah, maybe we'll our paths will cross again in another English, in another Team English direction or so.
Fantastic. I do hope so.
No, and I hope you have a lovely rest of year as well, and with these new positions that you've got. And and I can tell from speaking to you tonight, you're going to be an absolute success in them.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone else who's been listening tonight as well. I really, really appreciate it. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please use the use tag at TT Radio Official. You can contact myself at Jeff_Pedley, Pedley. Thank you so much for being part of the show tonight. Remember that you can catch up with all of the Teacher Talk Radio shows on Spotify, Apple Music, and all of the other review podcasts. Please know as well that on Teachers Talk Radio we have got a show starting this Sunday and every other Sunday afterwards at 10 p.m, which is called The Weekly Review, which brings together a panel of Teacher Talk Radio hosts to discuss the week's stories and a review of some of the best shows on Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you so much for being a part of the show tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.